Part 1, Chapter 16 of The Idiot. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Translated by Eva M. Martin. Part 1, Chapter 16. "It's good business," said Ptitsin at last, folding the letter and handing it back to the prince. "You will receive, without the slightest trouble, by the last will and testament of your aunt, a very large sum of money indeed." "Impossible!" cried the general, starting up as if he had been shot. Ptitsin explained, for the benefit of the company, that the prince's aunt had died 5 months since. He had never known her, but she was his mother's own sister, the daughter of a Moscow merchant, one Paparchin, who had died a bankrupt. But the elder brother of this same Paparchin had been an eminent and very rich merchant. A year since it had so happened that his only 2 sons had both died within the same month. This sad event had so affected the old man that he too had died very shortly after. He was a widower and had no relations left, excepting the prince's aunt, a poor woman living on charity, who was herself at the point of death from dropsy, but who had time before she died to set Salaskin to work to find her nephew, and to make her will, bequeathing her newly acquired fortune to him. It appeared that neither the prince nor the doctor with whom he lived in Switzerland had thought of waiting for further communications, but the prince had started straight away with Salaskin's letter in his pocket. "One thing I may tell you for certain," concluded Ptitsin, addressing the prince, "that there is no question about the authenticity of this matter. Anything that Salaskin writes you as regards your unquestionable right to this inheritance, you may look upon as so much money in your pocket. I congratulate you, prince. You may receive 1.5 million of roubles, perhaps more. I don't know. All I do know is that Paparchin was a very rich merchant indeed." "Hurrah!" cried Lebedeff in a drunken voice. "Hurrah for the last of the Myshkins! My goodness me, and I gave him 25 roubles this morning as though he were a beggar," blurted out the general, half senseless with amazement. "Well, I congratulate you, I congratulate you." And the general rose from his seat and solemnly embraced the prince. All came forward with congratulations. Even those of Rogojin's party, who had retreated into the next room, now crept softly back to look on. For the moment, even Nastasia Philipovna was forgotten. But gradually the consciousness crept back into the minds of each one present that the prince had just made her an offer of marriage. The situation had therefore become 3 times as fantastic as before. Totski sat and shrugged his shoulders, bewildered. He was the only guest left sitting at this time. The others had thronged round the table in disorder, and were all talking at once. It was generally agreed afterwards, in recalling that evening, that from this moment Nastasia Philipovna seemed entirely to lose her senses. She continued to sit still in her place, looking around at her guests with a strange, bewildered expression, as though she were trying to collect her thoughts and could not. Then she suddenly turned to the prince and glared at him with frowning brows. But this only lasted 1 moment. Perhaps it suddenly struck her that all this was a jest, but his face seemed to reassure her. She reflected and smiled again vaguely. "So I really am a princess," she whispered to herself ironically. and glancing accidentally at Daria Alexeyevna's face, she burst out laughing. "Ah, ha, ha, ha!" she cried. "This is an unexpected climax after all. I didn't expect this. What are you all standing up for, gentlemen? Sit down. Congratulate me and the prince. Ferdishenko, just step out and order some more champagne, will you? Katya, Pasha," she added suddenly, seeing the servants at the door, "come here. I'm going to be married, did you hear, to the prince. He has 1.5 million of roubles. He is Prince Myshkin, and has asked me to marry him. Here, prince, come and sit by me. And here comes the wine. Now then, ladies and gentlemen, where are your congratulations?" "Hurrah!" cried a number of voices. A rush was made for the wine by Rogojin's followers, though even among them there seemed some sort of realization that the situation had changed. Rogojin stood and looked on, with an incredulous smile, screwing up one side of his mouth. "Prince, my dear fellow, do remember what you are about," said the general, approaching Myshkin and pulling him by the coat sleeve. Nastasia Philipovna overheard the remark and burst out laughing. "No, no, general," she cried, "you had better look out. I am the princess now, you know. The prince won't let you insult me. Afanasy Ivanovitch, why don't you congratulate me? I shall be able to sit at table with your new wife now. Aha! See what you gain by marrying a prince. 1.5 million, and a prince, and an idiot into the bargain, they say. What better could I wish for? Life is only just about to commence for me in earnest. Rogojin, you are a little too late. Away with your paper parcel. I'm going to marry the prince. I'm richer than you are now." But Rogojin understood how things were tending at last. An inexpressibly painful expression came over his face. He wrung his hands. A groan made its way up from the depths of his soul. "Surrender her, for God's sake," he said to the prince. All around burst out laughing. "What, surrender her to you?" cried Daria Alexeyevna. "To a fellow who comes and bargains for a wife like a mushik? The prince wishes to marry her, and you—" "So do I! So do I! This moment, if I could. I'd give every farthing I have to do it." "You drunken mushik," said Daria Alexeyevna once more. "You ought to be kicked out of the place." The laughter became louder than ever. "Do you hear, prince?" said Nastasia Philipovna. "Do you hear how this mushik of a fellow goes on bargaining for your bride?" "He is drunk," said the prince quietly, "and he loves you very much. Won't you be ashamed afterwards to reflect that your wife very nearly ran away with Rogojin? Oh, you were raving, you were in a fever, you are still half delirious. And won't you be ashamed when they tell you afterwards that your wife lived at Totsky's expense so many years? No, I shall not be ashamed of that. You did not so live by your own will. And you'll never reproach me with it. Never. Take care, don't commit yourself for a whole lifetime." "Nastasia Philipovna," said the prince quietly and with deep emotion, "I said before that I shall esteem your consent to be my wife as a great honour to myself, and shall consider that it is you who will honour me, not I you, by our marriage. You laughed at these words, and others around us laughed as well, I heard them. Very likely I expressed myself funnily, and I may have looked funny. But for all that, I believe I understand where honour lies, And what I said was but the literal truth. You were about to ruin yourself just now, irrevocably. You would never have forgiven yourself for so doing afterwards. And yet you are absolutely blameless. It is impossible that your life should be altogether ruined at your age. What matter that Rogojin came bargaining here, and that Gavrila Ardalionovitch would have deceived you if he could? Why would you continually remind us of these facts? I assure you once more that very few could find it in them to act as you have acted this day. As for your wish to go with Rogojin, that was simply the idea of a delirious and suffering brain. You are still quite feverish. You ought to be in bed, not here. You know quite well that if you had gone with Rogojin, you would have become a washerwoman next day rather than stay with him. You are proud, Nastasia Philipovna, and perhaps you have really suffered so much that you imagine yourself to be a desperately guilty woman. You require a great deal of petting and looking after, Nastasia Philipovna, and I will do this. I saw your portrait this morning, and it seemed quite a familiar face to me. It seemed to me that the portrait face was calling to me for help. I shall respect you all my life, Nastasia Philipovna, concluded the prince, as though suddenly recollecting himself, and blushing to think of the sort of company before whom he had said all this. Ptitsin bowed his head and looked at the ground, overcome by a mixture of feelings. Totski muttered to himself, "He may be an idiot, but he knows that flattery is the best road to success here." The prince observed Gania's eyes flashing at him, as though they would gladly annihilate him then and there. "That's a kind-hearted man, if you like," said Daria Alexeyevna, whose wrath was quickly evaporating. "A refined man, but lost," murmured the general. Totski took his hat and rose to go. He and the general exchanged glances, making a private arrangement thereby to leave the house together. "Thank you, Prince. No one has ever spoken to me like that before," began Nastasia Philipovna. "Men have always bargained for me before this, and not a single respectable man has ever proposed to marry me. Do you hear, Afanasy Ivanovitch? What do you think of what the prince has just been saying? It was almost immodest, wasn't it? You, Rogojin, wait a minute, don't go yet. I see you don't intend to move, however. Perhaps I may go with you yet. Where did you mean to take me to?" "To Yekaterinhof," replied Lebedev. Rogojin simply stood staring, with trembling lips, not daring to believe his ears. He was stunned, as though from a blow on the head. "What are you thinking of, my dear Nastasia?" said Daria Alexeyevna in alarm. "What are you saying? You are not going mad, are you?" Nastasia Philipovna burst out laughing and jumped up from the sofa. "You thought I should accept this good child's invitation to ruin him, did you?" she cried. "That's Totski's way, not mine. He's fond of children. Come along, Rogojin, get your money ready. We won't talk about marrying just at this moment, but let's see the money at all events. Come. I may not marry you either. I don't know. I suppose you thought you'd keep the money if I did. Ha, 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 ha! Nonsense! I have no sense of shame left. I tell you, I have been Totski's concubine. Prince, you must marry Aglaya Ivanovna, not Nastasia Philipovna, or this fellow Ferdishenko will always be pointing the finger of scorn at you. You aren't afraid, I know, but I should always be afraid that I had ruined you. and that you would reproach me for it. As for what you say about my doing you honour by marrying you, well, Totski can tell you all about that. You had your eye on Aglaya, Gania, you know you had, and you might have married her if you had not come bargaining. You are all like this. You should choose once for all between disreputable women and respectable ones, or you are sure to get mixed. Look at the general, how he's staring at me. This is too horrible, said the general, starting to his feet. All were standing up now. Nastasia was absolutely beside herself. I am very proud, in spite of what I am, she continued. You called me perfection just now, Prince. A nice sort of perfection, to throw up a prince and 1.5 million of roubles, in order to be able to boast of the fact afterwards. What sort of a wife should I make for you, after all I have said? Afanasy Ivanovitch, do you observe I have really and truly thrown away 1 million of roubles? And you thought that I should consider your wretched 75,000, with Gania thrown in for a husband, a paradise of bliss. Take your 75,000 back, sir. You did not reach the 100,000. Rogojin cut a better dash than you did. I'll console Gania myself. I have an idea about that. But now I must be off. I've been in prison for 10 years. I'm free at last. Well, Rogojin, what are you waiting for? Let's get ready and go. Come along, shouted Rogojin, beside himself with joy. Hey, all of you fellows, wine, round with it, fill the glasses. Get away, he shouted frantically, observing that Daria Alexeyevna was approaching to protest against Nastasia's conduct. Get away, she's mine. Everything's mine. She's a queen. Get away. He was panting with ecstasy. He walked round and round Nastasia Philipovna and told everybody to keep their distance. All the Rogojin company were now collected in the drawing-room. Some were drinking, some laughed and talked. All were in the highest and wildest spirits. Ferdishenko was doing his best to unite himself to them. The general and Totski again made an attempt to go. Gania, too, stood hat in hand, ready to go, but seemed to be unable to tear his eyes away from the scene before him. Get out! Keep your distance! Shouted Rogojin. What are you shouting about there? Cried Nastasia. I'm not yours yet. I may kick you out for all you know. I haven't taken your money yet. There it all is on the table. Here, give me over that packet. Is there 100,000 roubles in that one packet? Phew, what abominable stuff it looks. Oh, nonsense, Daria Alexeyevna. You surely did not expect me to ruin him, indicating the prince. Fancy him nursing me. Why, he needs a nurse himself. The general there will be his nurse now, you'll see. Here, prince, look here. Your bride is accepting money. What a disreputable woman she must be. And you wished to marry her. What are you crying about? Is it a bitter dose? Never mind, you shall laugh yet. Trust to time. In spite of these words, there were 2 large tears rolling down Nastasia's own cheeks. It's far better to think twice of it now than afterwards. Oh, you mustn't cry like that. There's Katya crying too. What is it, Katya, dear? I shall leave you and Pasha a lot of things. I've laid them out for you already. But goodbye now. I made an honest girl like you serve a low woman like myself. It's better so, Prince, it is indeed. You'd begin to despise me afterwards. We should never be happy. Oh, you needn't swear, Prince. I shan't believe you, you know. How foolish it would be, too. No, no. We'd better say goodbye and part friends. I am a bit of a dreamer myself, and I used to dream of you once. Very often during those 5 years down at his estate, I used to dream and think, and I always imagined just such a good, honest, foolish fellow as you, one who should come and say to me, 'You are an innocent woman, Nastasia Philipovna, and I adore you.' I dreamt of you often. I used to think so much down there that I nearly went mad. And then this fellow here would come down. He would stay a couple of months out of the 12, and disgrace and insult and deprave me, and then go, so that I longed to drown myself in the pond 1,000 times over. But I did not dare do it. I hadn't the heart. And now... Well, are you ready, Rogojin?" "Ready. Keep your distance, all of you." "We're all ready," said several of his friends. "The troikas are at the door, bells and all." Nastasia Philipovna seized the packet of banknotes. "Gania, I have an idea. I wish to recompense you. Why should you lose all? Rogojin, would he crawl for 3 roubles as far as the Vasily Ostrov?" "Oh, wouldn't he just!" "Well, look here, Gania. I wish to look into your heart once more, for the last time. You've worried me for the last 3 months. Now it's my turn. Do you see this packet? It contains 100,000 roubles. Now, I'm going to throw it into the fire, here, before all these witnesses. As soon as the fire catches hold of it, you put your hands into the fire and pick it out. Without gloves, you know. You must have bare hands, and you must turn your sleeves up. Pull it out, I say, and it's all yours. You may burn your fingers a little, of course, but then it's 100,000 roubles, remember. It won't take you long to lay hold of it and snatch it out. I shall so much admire you if you put your hands into the fire for my money. All here present may be witnesses that the whole packet of money is yours if you get it out. If you don't get it out, it shall burn. I will let no one else come. Away, get away, all of you. It's my money. Rogojin has bought me with it. Is it my money, Rogojin?" "Yes, my queen. It's your own money, my joy." "Get away then, all of you. I shall do as I like with my own. Don't meddle. Ferdishenko, make up the fire, quick." "Nastasia Philipovna, I can't. My hands won't obey me," said Ferdishenko, astounded and helpless with bewilderment. "Nonsense!" cried Nastasia Philipovna, seizing the poker and raking a couple of logs together. No sooner did a tongue of flame burst out than she threw the packet of notes upon it. Everyone gasped. Some even crossed themselves. "She's mad! She's mad!" was the cry. Oughtn't we to secure her?" asked the general of Petitsin in a whisper. "Or shall we send for the authorities? Why, she's mad, isn't she? Isn't she, "No, I hardly think she is actually mad," whispered Petitsin, who was as white as his handkerchief and trembling like a leaf. He could not take his eyes off the smouldering packet. "She's mad, surely, isn't she?" the general appealed to Totski. "I told you she wasn't an ordinary woman," replied the latter, who was as pale as anyone. "Oh, but positively, you know, 100,000 roubles." "Goodness gracious! Good heavens!" came from all 4 quarters of the room. All now crowded round the fire and thronged to see what was going on. Everyone lamented and gave vent to exclamations of horror and woe. Some jumped up on chairs in order to get a better view. Daria Alexeyevna ran into the next room and whispered excitedly to Katya and Pasha. The beautiful German disappeared altogether. "My lady, my sovereign!" lamented Lebedev, falling on his knees before Nastasia Philipovna and stretching out his hands towards the fire. "It's 100,000 roubles. It is indeed. I packed it up myself. I saw the money. My queen, let me get into the fire after it. Say the word. I'll put my whole grey head into the fire for it. I have a poor lame wife and 13 children. My father died of starvation last week. Nastasia Philipovna! Nastasia Philipovna!" The wretched little man wept and groaned and crawled towards the fire. "Away, out of the way!" cried Nastasia. "Make room, all of you! Gania, what are you standing there for? Don't stand on ceremony, put in your hand. There's your whole happiness smouldering away. Look, quick!" But Gania had borne too much that day, and especially this evening, and he was not prepared for this last, quite unexpected trial. The crowd parted on each side of him, and he was left face to face with Nastasia Philipovna, 3 paces from her. She stood by the fire and waited, with her intent gaze fixed upon him. Gania stood before her in his evening clothes, holding his white gloves and hat in his hand, speechless and motionless, with arms folded and eyes fixed on the fire. A silly, meaningless smile played on his white, death-like lips. He could not take his eyes off the smouldering packet, but it appeared that something new had come to birth in his soul, as though he were vowing to himself that he would bear this trial. He did not move from his place. In a few seconds it became evident to all that he did not intend to rescue the money. "Hey, look at it! It'll burn in another minute or two," cried Nastasia Philipovna. "You'll hang yourself afterwards, you know, if it does. I'm not joking." The fire, choked between a couple of smouldering pieces of wood, had died down for the first few moments after the packet was thrown upon it, but a little tongue of fire now began to lick the paper from below, and soon, gathering courage, mounted the sides of the parcel and crept around it. In another moment the whole of it burst into flames, and the exclamations of woe and horror were redoubled. "Nastasia Philipovna!" lamented Lebedev again, straining towards the fireplace. But Rogojin dragged him away and pushed him to the rear once more. The whole of Rogojin's being was concentrated in one rapturous gaze of ecstasy. He could not take his eyes off Nastasia. He stood drinking her in, as it were. He was in the 7th heaven of delight. "Oh, what a queen she is!" he ejaculated every other minute, throwing out the remark for anyone who liked to catch it. "That's the sort of woman for me! Which of you would think of doing a thing like that, you blackguards, eh?" he yelled. He was hopelessly and wildly beside himself with ecstasy. The prince watched the whole scene, silent and dejected. "I'll pull it out with my teeth for 1,000, said Ferdishenko. "So would I," said another from behind, "with pleasure. Devil take the thing," he added in a tempest of despair. "It will all be burnt up in a minute. It's burning! It's burning!" "It's burning! It's burning!" cried all, thronging nearer and nearer to the fire in their excitement. "Gania, don't be a fool. I tell you for the last time." "Get on, quick!" shrieked Ferdishenko, rushing wildly up to Gania and trying to drag him to the fire by the sleeve of his coat. "Get it, you dummy! It's burning away fast! Oh, damn the thing!" Gania hurled Ferdishenko from him. Then he turned sharp round and made for the door. But he had not gone a couple of steps when he tottered and fell to the ground. "He's fainted," the cry went round. "And the money's burning still," Lebedev lamented. "Burning for nothing," shouted others. "Katya, Pasha, bring him some water," cried Nastasia Philipovna. Then she took the tongs and fished out the packet. Nearly the whole of the outer covering was burned away, but it was soon evident that the contents were hardly touched. The packet had been wrapped in a threefold covering of newspaper, and the notes were safe. All breathed more freely. "Some dirty little 1,000 or so may be touched," said Lebedev, immensely relieved. "But there's very little harm done after all." "It's all his. The whole packet is for him, do you hear? All of you," cried Nastasia Philipovna, placing the packet by the side of Gania. "He restrained himself and didn't go after it, so his self-respect is greater than his thirst for money. All right, he'll come to directly. He must have the packet or he'll cut his throat afterwards. There, he's coming to himself. General, Totsky, all of you, did you hear me? The money is all Gania's. I give it to him, fully conscious of my action, as recompense for anything he thinks best. Tell him so. Let it lie here beside him. Off we go, Rogojin. Goodbye, Prince. I have seen a man for the first time in my life. Goodbye, Afanasy Ivanovitch, and thanks." The Rogojin gang followed their leader and Nastasia Philipovna to the entrance hall, laughing and shouting and whistling. In the hall the servants were waiting, and handed her fur cloak. Marfa, the cook, ran in from the kitchen. Nastasia kissed them all round. "Are you really throwing us all over, little mother? Where are you going to? And on your birthday too?" cried the four girls, crying over her and kissing her hands. "I am going out into the world, Katya. Perhaps I shall be a laundress, I don't know. No more of Afanasy Ivanovitch anyhow. Give him my respects. Don't think badly of me, girls." The prince hurried down to the front gate, where the party was settling into the troikas, all the bells tinkling a merry accompaniment the while. The general caught him up on the stairs. "Prince, prince!" he cried, seizing hold of his arm. "Recollect yourself. Drop her, prince. You see what sort of a woman she is. I am speaking to you like a father." The prince glanced at him, but said nothing. He shook himself free and rushed on downstairs. The general was just in time to see the prince take the first sledge he could get, and, giving the order to Ekaterinhof, start off in pursuit of the troikas. Then the general's fine grey horse dragged that worthy home, with some new thoughts and some new hopes and calculations developing in his brain, and with the pearls in his pocket, for he had not forgotten to bring them along with him, being a man of business. Amid his new thoughts and ideas, there came once or twice the image of Nastasia Philipovna. The general sighed. "I'm really sorry," he muttered. "She's a ruined woman, mad. However, the prince is not for Nastasia Philipovna now. Perhaps it's as well." Two more of Nastasia's guests, who walked a short distance together, indulged in high moral sentiments of a similar nature. "Do you know, Totsky, this is all very like what they say goes on among the Japanese," said Ptitsin. The offended party there, they say, marches off to his insulter and says to him, 'You insulted me, so I have come to rip myself open before your eyes.' And with these words he does actually rip his stomach open before his enemy, and considers, doubtless, that he is having all possible and necessary satisfaction and revenge. There are strange characters in the world, sir." And you think there was something of this sort here, do you? Dear me, a very remarkable comparison, you know. But you must have observed, my dear Ptitsin, that I did all I possibly could. I could do no more than I did. And you must admit that there are some rare qualities in this woman. I felt I could not speak in that bedlam, or I should have been tempted to cry out when she reproached me that she herself was my best justification. Such a woman could make anyone forget all reason, everything. Even that mujik Rogojin you saw brought her 100,000 roubles. Of course, all that happened tonight was ephemeral, fantastic, unseemly, yet it lacked neither colour nor originality. My God, what might not have been made of such a character, combined with such beauty? Yet in spite of all efforts, in spite of all education even, all those gifts are wasted. She is an uncut diamond. I have often said so." And Afanasy Ivanovitch heaved a deep sigh. End of part 1 of The Idiot. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.